What's up, everybody? Before we get going today, huge shout out to this guy down here, Slandered Gaming, because he was the guy who put out the video that originally brought my attention to some additional information surrounding all of this chaos around the OGL and Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and everything else, especially regarding to the 1,000 employees that got fired as all of this was coming to a head last week. Now, a lot of people would like to attribute that to the chaos surrounding Wizards of the Coast and the OGL, but the reality is that this has been going on for quite some time, and I wasn't aware of all of that. And so, shout out to Slandered for bringing this to my attention. He's got a great video, which we're showing a thumbnail of right now. I'm going to link that down below because I highly recommend everybody go watch that. I'm going to give my take on the situation as well, but this is where I first heard about this, and so go listen to his take. It's got some really good information. And while you're over there, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, support him in any way you can. Let's go ahead and dive into this. So essentially, what has happened is over the course of all of this happening, this was 3 days ago over at golocalpro.com, Hasbro slashed 1,000 jobs and is talking about leadership changes. Can I go into dark mode here? Yes. Now, before anyone out there goes, yay, we won. So here's the thing. This knowledge now has made that victory with the OGL very bittersweet in my mouth. Because even though I recognize that the OGL chaos was not the only contributing factor to Hasbro's stock prices failing. That's been going on since last year. There's a report we're going to be talking about here from November of last year when their stock tumbled after a bank issued a warning about Magic the Gathering. But a lot of people are trying to attribute this to we won, we pushed Wizards of the Coast, and there's going to be changes, and we affected these changes. That's not necessarily true. This was one of many factors leading up to this. I think it definitely had an impact, but not in the way that I think a lot of people wanted it to. Obviously, I'm on the bandwagon of not wanting that OGL to go through. And I'm one of the people who was out there making videos around the OGL and putting my foot down and saying, screw you, Wizards, because I have a vested interest in it, because I have a tabletop world that we put out for sale last May using the OGL. And I immediately had to go into a panic and strip the OGL out of my books and all this other stuff at the beginning of the year because Wizards of the Coast made this stupid announcement that they were going to start taking 25% of my income and wanted license back properties for all of my product, and they were never going to pay me any royalties and anything out with their leaked 1.1 OGL. So I immediately had to go into panic mode, like a lot of people did because of this. And so I was out there in the forefront championing against the OGL and telling Wizards, you guys are nuts, you need to change it back, stop doing what you're doing. I'm with the ORC Alliance now. I fully support what Paizo is doing. And I've been out there on the front lines. And in the back of my mind, if you've heard any of my videos, I have firmly been in the camp of I refuse to boycott Wizards of the Coast because of this. I have told everybody I moved my products off the OGL. I won't be going back to the OGL. I won't, at the time, before the recent announcement regarding the SRD 5.1 going into the open and everything else, going into Creative Commons, before that happened a couple of days ago, which is the moment we all went, we won. Did we really win? Leading up to that point, I kept telling people I'm not boycotting them. I won't buy any more future tabletop products. I'm not going to develop on the OGL. I've already moved our products off the OGL. We're looking at some other rule set for now. In the meantime, looking at the ORC Alliance and all this other stuff. But I kept telling people, I'm going to go see the movie. I'm going to watch the TV show. I'm going to play Baldur's Gate 3. I'm going to buy other video games that come out. I'm going to read Dragonlance novels. I'm going to read Forgotten Realms novels. I am not going to boycott Dungeons and Dragons because of this management issue or this decision-making issue that's coming from corporate executives down the pipeline, because Dungeons and Dragons to me is 35 years of my life or so, and thousands of hours of enjoyment. So I'm not just going to give up on D&D because there's some management snafus. Professionally, I might not want to work with them anymore, but as a consumer, I'm happy to keep consuming content, just not the tabletop stuff. But there have been people who are firmly in the camp of we want to boycott. We want to see them suffer. We want to watch them burn to the ground, scorched earth. We want everyone to lose their jobs. Specifically, people are like, we want, the CEOs and the executives to all lose their jobs. But here's the reality. Executives are never the first ones to lose their job. You got to really, 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 really F up in a public manner. And I would argue almost the only thing that kind of gets people immediately fired these days is this, if there's some sort of a sexual assault scandal or some sort of, you know, this guy did some creepy stuff with some interns, 10 years ago or something. That's like the only thing that really gets people's attention these days and gets CEOs and executives kicked out immediately. Everything else is a lot of the times water under the bridge because the executives hired these people because they're results driven individuals and these people bring results to the companies they work for. And even if it makes a few of the customers upset in the long run, it doesn't really matter if the profits are still there. So, and that's an important part of this conversation because that's what we're dealing with is a bunch of executives who are all about the profit. And those executives are in place because of Hasbro, who is interested in profit. And when you look at the vast majority of the people who got fired, they're not the executives. These are normal, everyday working people. And as Slandered said in his video, heart goes out to anybody who lost their job during this because with the recession and inflation and everything else that's going on right now is not a good time to be without a job. And it sucks to be in that position. But for people who think that, you're going to hurt the executives, that's not going to happen. Innocent people are going to lose their jobs, which is why I keep telling people, even though technically we did win on Friday when Wizards of the Coast backed off the OGL 1.0A and gave the SRD 5.1 to the Creative Commons, even though that is a win, we need to be gracious in that win and say, all right, cool, thanks. Let's all settle down now and let's let things try to get back to some form of equilibrium, if that's even possible, so that Wizards of the Coast can focus on making a better product and earning back the reputation and the trust that they just lost over this chaotic time period. So it sucks when people lose their jobs, but for people who think that the CEOs are going to be the ones to go, that's heads may roll down the pipeline, but it might take some time. So this report talks about how they're eliminating 15% of its global workforce in 2023 to take effect immediately within the next several weeks. The cuts are going to impact about 1,000 employees. It is unknown how many Rhode Islanders will lose their job. The company, here's the effed up thing. With these actions, along with ongoing systems and supply chain investments, the company is on track to achieve its goal of 250 to 300 million in annual run rate cost savings by year end 2025 to drive profitability and reinvestment in core brand growth. This is important. They don't care who they have to fire as long as they get those results right there, profit-driven results, because this is a corporation that is owned by investors at the end of the day. So profit is the only thing here. And it even says here that despite strong growth in Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming, Hasbro Pulse and our licensing business, our consumer products business underperformed in the fourth quarter against the backdrop of a challenging holiday consumer environment because of all of the previous issues mentioned. The stock has plummeted down to 63.78 as of this writing, down 39% from its 52-week high of 105.13. There's really good stuff here if you want to read through it. But they talk about how, as a result of the organizational commercial changes, Eric Nyman, president and chief operating officer, is departing Hasbro. So this is the president and COO. And the consumer products business will report directly to the CEO in the interim. So he's out, and probably because that person draws a big salary and he didn't drive results. So one person from the executive suite sounds like lost their job, but we don't have mention of anybody else losing their job. And in all of this chaos, where has the CEO of Wizards of the Coast been? Where is this individual? The one who came out and said that, D&D is under monetized and my job is to monetize it like a video game and make a bunch. Where is this CEO? Because I haven't seen them. I've seen this Kyle guy making statements for the past few weeks. He's apparently an executive producer who was hired a few months ago. Since when does an executive producer make public relations statements for the company? An executive producer's job is to keep the production on track, to manage the production team and art leads and writing leads and social media leads and marketing leads, like all these things. The producer is the person doing all of that. The CEO should be the one out there making statements, and yet we don't see any of the executives or any of the CEOs from any of these companies out there addressing any of these things in the public. What's interesting to know about, and this is something I had no clue about until watching Slander's video, and it got me reading about this. So apparently last year, Hasbro's stock took a tumble after a Bank of America analyst issued a dire outlook about Magic the Gathering's aggressive release schedule and strategy. It did a 10% stock dive after analyst Jason Haas downgraded Hasbro's stock outlook from buy to underperform. The reason for this rare double downgrade was due to a deep dive on Hasbro's recent strategy with its Magic the Gathering releases. Surprisingly, Haas mirrored much of the recent criticism about Magic the Gathering's recent releases, pointing out that the deluge of releases was flooding the market. Hasbro is overproducing Magic cards, which has propped up recent results. Card prices are falling, game stores are losing money, collectors are liquidating, and large retailers are cutting orders. Now, what's interesting about this is that at the time of that writing, this is back in last November, Magic the Gathering made up about 15% of Hasbro's overall sales and was recently touted as their first billion-dollar brand. But Haas noted that the game's growth had not been because of an expansion of its player base, but rather by monetizing existing players, growing primarily by extracting more revenue from each player rather than growing its player base. So they got a stock downgrade, and stocks plummeted. And this was back in November. So all the way back in last year, and I don't know for how long, probably before that, the stock was doing issues, I believe, if I understand some of the other things I've read, because of the issues with inflation and people not having a lot of disposable income and everything else. And they talk about that in this report. The consumer spending changed dramatically in the year. So I've said all of that to say this. Hasbro has been on the decline for a while now, even though, as this report says, they saw strong growth in Wizards of the Coast. It's not the fault of the OGL fiasco, 4,000 people losing their job, but it is, in my opinion, a contributing factor to this being the win of that trigger being pulled. Because obviously they've been suffering and bleeding losses for the past 6-8 months, longer perhaps, and they had to figure out something to keep their profit margins still high. And so they laid off, or they're laying off 1,000 people this year, which does make the victory that we just won very bittersweet. And it leads me to kind of sitting here with a more somber attitude after the weekend has passed, thinking to myself, did we really win? In the scope of the conversation of we got the OGL back, sort of, but we got the SRD into public hands, we definitely won. That's a win in that battle. But if this is an ongoing campaign, then we've only won one battle. And it remains to be seen what's going to happen in the weeks and months to come. More importantly, though, Wizards of the Coast, like I said, I refuse to boycott them, and I also don't wish for them to go down in a piling heap of flames. Were there mistakes made? Absolutely. Are those mistakes something that they can recover from? Absolutely. Can people forgive and forget? Some people can, some people can't. That's just a fact of the world that we live in and the times that we live in. There are still some people who are pissed off about what happened 20 years ago with 4th edition. I'm not one of those people. I don't put the sins of the father at the feet of the sons. That happened then. That was different leadership. This is now different leadership. I can absolutely point to the fiasco regarding the OGL and say, that's ridiculous. But I can also understand that that was driven by profit margins. They need profitability. And so look at what they did with Magic the Gathering. They squeezed an existing player base for as much money as possible, but didn't grow the brand. With Dungeons and Dragons, what did they just attempt to do? They just attempted to squeeze in the same way that they did with Magic the Gathering last year. However, This time around, the outbreak and the outcry and the outrage was large enough and loud enough that they backed off, and we were able to impact some form of change. Because at the end of the day, even if this had never happened, I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing it did happen, even though it sucks that 1,000 people lost their jobs. This is why I say it's a bittersweet thing. Change is never easy. There's always going to be something bad that happens, or something painful that happens is a better way to say that. Change is always painful. Because if we hadn't had the controversy around the OGL, we wouldn't have the ORC alliance. We wouldn't have the RPG ESU alliance. We wouldn't have all of these things that are coming out as a direct result of the controversy that happened because of the OGL. But at the end of the day, the big thing to know here, at least as far as this goes, is that Hasbro has been on a downward slope for quite some time. It wasn't directly the results of what happened with Wizards of the Coast. And now, one of the most important things Wizards of the Coast has to do is it has to try to find a way to heal and get that trust back, and to start getting to the point where it can be, and it can absolutely be a profitable business again. It might not hit the profit margins that they want with $250-300 million estimated, that we need to make, otherwise people start losing their jobs, but it can still be a very profitable brand because D&D is ingrained in a lot of us, and we've grown up with it and we love it. And even though the company made a big misstep, it doesn't diminish from what D&D has brought into our lives over the years and what it could continue to bring, while at the same time now we have all this other stuff that's cropping up. So again, bittersweet. It sucks that 1,000 people lost their jobs or are going to be losing their jobs over the course of this year, and it's one of those things I like to point out. When corporations start to get involved with any sort of business, whether it starts as a hobby or not, it can end up in the place where we're at now, where many people's lives are affected. And this is supposed to be something that is all about enjoyment. Hasbro is a games company. Why are we not celebrating games and enjoying games? And instead we have to deal with these controversies that are affecting people's livelihoods on multiple sides of the equation. It's a very sobering, I should say, somber experience and sobering experience to live through this and see it. I may not have lost my job, but my livelihood was definitely threatened, and I had to make some significant changes because of this. I don't think that's quite as devastating as someone who got fired from their job, but it's just, there are degrees to everything, and I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's is it really a win? I don't know. I'll continue to think about it as we get deeper into this week. I just know that after the weekend and after watching Slandered's video, it just made me put on my thinking cap for a Monday morning video and say, I don't know, guys. It feels meh to me. Anyway, if you got to the end and you like what you saw here, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, support if you can, super chats on these premieres, super thanks on uploaded videos, memberships. We got 3 different tiers here. We also have our Patreon page for our tabletop world, point and click adventure game, and book series. There's a Discord. All the links are down there. See you next time. Stay safe, everybody. Happy gaming.